I'm starting with 2.5 cups of flour for my pie crust. And then I'm going to cut in my butter. I don't like getting the food processor out and messing with all that. I like this simple. I just use flour, butter, sugar, salt, and water. Sugar is totally optional. You don't have to add sugar to your pie crust, but I do add it when I'm doing a sweet recipe. And for your water, you're going to want to use ice water so that it's nice and cold. You don't want to risk the butter melting at all or even getting very soft, because you want to have like chunks or speckles of butter in there. When my mom made pie crust when I was growing up, she would do a similar recipe, except she would do lard instead of butter. I think she also maybe used Crisco sometimes. So I'm just looking for a texture where the butter pieces are basically like the size of peas. It's totally normal for the pie crust to be looking dry at this point. And you really don't want to overwork your pie dough or else it will get tough. All right, that's looking pretty good to me. So now I'm just going to add water little by little until this comes together a little bit more. And I'll show you what that starts to look like. All right, this is looking pretty good. You can still see some chunks of butter in there. So it's not like the butter has totally combined. And you really don't want this to be like coming together totally and completely, because the more water there is in here, the tougher it's going to be. So I like to just add enough water until it starts to come together like this. And then overnight, the flour will absorb that water while it's in the fridge, and it really won't be that shaggy tomorrow. It'll come together pretty easily. So I'm gonna wrap this in cling wrap. Tomorrow, this will be all ready for me to use for apple dumplings and apple pie. This makes 2 pie crusts. So I'll use one of the pie crusts for the apple dumplings and the other one for the apple pie that I'm gonna make. The apple pie recipe is my favorite. I love that apple pie recipe. It's not like your typical pie you would buy from the grocery store. It actually tastes good, and it's a little bit unique, but it's not so unique that you're like, I would rather just have a classic one. You can still see those butter specks in there. It's gonna make the pie nice and flaky. Alright, so I'm going to quickly show you how to make the sauce for the apple dumplings. So I started with 1 1/3 cups of water, and then I'm adding 2.5 cups of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of butter, and about 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. And I'm just going to heat this all up together until it is all combined and heated. While my sauce is heating up, I'm working on my apples. So to prepare my apples, I just peeled the skin off, most of it at least, and then I need to take the core out of each apple. Just split it in half and take the core out. That's all you need to do. And make sure you keep the halves together that stay together. Alrighty, I'm going to use half of this pie crust for the apple dumplings and the other half for the apple pie that I'm going to make. All those specks of butter that are going to make this really flaky. Sometimes I find that it helps if I fold my pie crust over. It'll help it roll out a little bit better without falling apart. All right, my pie crust is ready to go. I'm gonna cut it into 6 pieces so that I can put the apples in. I really don't mind if they're not perfect, because I'm just going to wrap them around the apples anyways. And if they're not big enough in one way, then I can just roll it out a little bit more. I'm going to put the apple in, put a little tab of butter in there, sprinkle a little cinnamon, sprinkle a little sugar, and then wrap it up. There is a way to make these apple dumplings beautifully wrapped, but I find it easier just to really wrap the pie crust so it's enclosing the apple. All right, I'm gonna place my apple dumplings in this 9x13 dish, and then I'm gonna pour my syrup that I made for these on top of them. All right, let's get started on this apple pie. So I'm gonna start with half of a cup of flour. I'm just making the topping right now for the apple pie. It's a streusel topping. So half a cup of flour, about 1/4 of a cup of unpacked brown sugar, and then 1/2 of a cup, so 1/6 of a cup of granulated sugar, and then 1/2 of a stick of butter. And I'm just going to cut that butter in until it basically becomes like crumbs, coarse crumbs in here. And that will be our simple streusel topping. If you don't have one of these, I don't even know what it's called, but this tool to cut in butter, I highly recommend getting one because I do use it a lot when I'm making pastry type desserts, like pies or cheese Danish, stuff like that. I'm just going to refrigerate that until I'm ready to use it. I'm going to chop my apples up nice and thin. I like to chop my apples by cutting around the core and then just slicing. I think it's a lot easier. To these sliced apples, I'm adding a bit of lime juice. And then right here, I have 3/4 of a cup of sugar, 3 tablespoons of flour, a little bit of salt, and maybe like 1/2 teaspoon to a teaspoon of cinnamon. All right, I'm just gonna keep this in the fridge until I'm done with the pie crust. Pie crust and how I crimp the edges is I basically turn it under a bit to make a kind of thick ring around the top. All right, and then I go around and I do the fluted edge. And I find that the crimped edges really don't hold up that well, especially with an all butter pie crust, but it does hold up better when you have a lot of filling on the inside. So hopefully the apples do keep this crust held up and we get a good end result. But if not, that's okay. It'll still taste amazing. All right, so there is my crust. Here come the apples. The apples will bake down quite a bit, so that's why it's kind of overfilled right now. Because if it wasn't, then it would look like there were barely any apples in it once it's baked. And I like making sure there are no apples with the corners sticking straight up, because those little corners will probably get burnt. 1 egg, 1 cup of heavy cream. And this mixture right here is why this is my favorite apple pie recipe. Basically makes it like a beautiful custardy apple pie. After about 40 minutes, I will take it out and add the streusel topping on top and then cook it for another 20 minutes. Thanks for watching, guys, and make sure you hit the subscribe button because my next video, we are canning a lot of applesauce and you don't want to miss it. Take care.